Justine, got a bunch of stories today, so let's start off with the announcement by Christine Fréchette, 3 new measures to help Quebecers with the cost of living crisis. Look, obviously no one's going to argue with any of this. The question, however, does become, can we afford to do this? I say we, can this provincial government running its deficit as big as it is afford to do it? What's your take on this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does seem like a lot of cosmetic stuff, and we did hear Charles Milliard come out and criticize the measures today for exactly that reason. And Aaron, as I look at them, it looks like these are the kinds of things that are popular announcements to make. Of course, we have so many politicians now trying to position themselves on the cost of living question because we see it at the supermarket. It touches people's lives every single day. And so politicians know that this is a popular position to take if they want to appear like they're doing something about the cost of living. And so what she's announcing, though, is going to end up costing the government a whole lot of money and is not going to keep a lot of money in people's pockets. That's what I'm concerned about. So she's talking about removing tax from what were previously taxable items at the supermarket. So when we talk about snacks and prepared foods, right, ready-to-eat items, things like that, which up until now have been taxed, it's going to save Quebecers in the ballpark of $50 a year, which is not a huge amount of money, but it's going to reduce Quebec government revenues by $100 million annually. So, I mean, I look at this and I think if it's not making a huge difference in people's pocketbooks, but it is cutting into government budget at a time when the government is running an incredible deficit, I don't think it's a good idea. And I don't think it's going to be popular. And I actually think that Éric Girard is right, that Quebecers aren't fools. And they're going to look at it and think, it just kind of looks like an electoralist move at this point since we're only a few months away from the election. So she's calling it a bouquet of, measures to try to reduce pressure on families, but really it's not going to reduce the pressure by that much. The other one that was announced was a $50 reduction for car registrations. Mm-hmm. And a one-time payment to low and middle income earners. So again, these aren't huge amounts of money for individuals, but they're removing a tremendous amount of revenue from the government.
It's interesting when we talked about this, I mentioned this to David Hertel, right? We spoke earlier in the day, and David pointed out, it may not be a lot, but it's a premier who's been, if I can use the word, a bit hyperactive with announcements, right, in the past couple of weeks. That's what people notice. Polls are showing her numbers have picked up. I imagine this won't hurt. And where's the opposition been with anything to offer? Do you feel the same way? We heard anything from the opposition say, hey, well, if you vote for us, here's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I feel like the opposition parties at this point are not taking the space that they should be taking. You're absolutely right about that. I think they're probably too busy right now putting together their campaigns and their campaign strategy. But Christine Fréchette has had the platform to herself because she stepped into the role as automatic Premier of Quebec. So she has all of the leeway and the budget, by the way, at her disposal. She was given that $250 million envelope as any leadership candidate would have had access to, whether it was her or Bernard Drinville, to do with as she pleases. And now what I'm concerned about, and I hope Quebecers are also concerned about too, is the fact that she's already busted that budget. With everything that she's announced so far, she's busted the budget. So yes, she's hyperactive. She's been traveling, meeting the French president, meeting with Mark Carney, meeting with Trump's team, and so on. That's great. But when she starts busting the budget this close to an election, I hope the Quebecers are going to, see past the electoralism of it. Because sure, everybody likes to know that their taxes are going to be reduced and everybody likes a little extra money, little extra change in their pocket, but not when it comes with a cost.
Yeah, and by the way, there's no guarantee that this is the end of it either. I mean, once you've gone through that, blown through the $250 million that Éric Girard kind of gave you, you can keep going as far as you want. David had actually said as well, remember, she's the premier, not him. He's only the finance minister.
Absolutely. So her everything that she's announced so far, Girard has estimated at $336 million. So that's almost $100 million over the envelope that she was given. And in my opinion, it's not a good look for her because it doesn't look like she's managing the budget appropriately. And yes, she has the authority to do that as premier. Girard can give her all of the advice that he wants to give her, but ultimately it's her choice. But when you look at the recurring cost, it gets worse because it's $682 million when you factor in that many of these measures are going to be recurring.
So I want to move from that to a story here, Justine, that you have that I'd not seen. So there's a new report from We Quebec, their sovereignist group. What is this telling us?
It's super interesting. This is a group that, as you said, it's a sovereignist group, but they're not related. They're not directly related to any political movement. And they held a series of consultations over the past few months with 50 different organizations. So all kinds of groups, everything essentially except political groups. So that could include cultural groups, education, or civil rights defense groups, chambers of commerce, unions, all of those sorts of groups to get their opinion on a series of questions, because they're, of course, trying to take the pulse of the nation when it comes to our sentiments regarding sovereignty and trying to advance the sovereignist cause. And what came out of that consultation were three strong conclusions. First of all, a sense of powerlessness with regards to the future of Quebec. And next, many of the respondents, 77% of the respondents, said that what we need is a new societal project. And they're calling that a quiet revolution 2.0. But in my mind, it doesn't have to be a sovereigntist project. It could be another comprehensive societal, like a large societal project that we take on as a group, as Quebecers. And the third conclusion, and here's where it gets a little bit crunchy and the tension comes out, is that 64% believe that Quebec has regressed on our ability to cohabitate, to live together with the different immigrant populations. They note an increasing polarization and are saying that this is alarming and that we can't let ourselves go backward. Now, this is interesting to me because it's coming from within the sovereignty movement. These are the kinds of criticisms that we've been hearing from federalist parties and federalist groups, and people like you and me, Aaron, talking and critiquing some of the things we've been hearing from the Parti Québécois in particular, and about the way they talk about immigrants and the way that they address living together and so on. It's been a very, very polarizing discourse. And this is the first time that I've heard that kind of a criticism coming from within the movement itself. So it's an interesting sign that they're now, getting into that dialogue internally of, well, maybe this is what's holding us back. Maybe we need to change our approach. And with people like Louisa Arel, some of the more well-known figures of the sovereignty movement saying that it is something that needs to be addressed if the sovereignty movement wants to have any chance of success going forward. So some good self-analysis coming out of that. And I actually think that the report, some of the findings of this survey, this broad survey, are interesting for maybe other parties as well, not just sovereign parties.
So I would just take that and use that as a springboard, Justine, to talk about the Daniel Smith and what Alberta's going on. I'd like to know what you think about everything you've heard so far.
Oh, gosh, I find it so stressful, the fact that Alberta is proposing this referendum question. I can't believe the timing of it. And my thoughts about this are that really this movement is rooted in a lot of the frustration that grew out of the COVID period. Alberta, in particular, seemed to react very strongly against the imposition of certain government mandates. And this led to a kind of a resurgence in the feeling against the federal government, who was imposing these sanitary mandates during the pandemic. And that made sense in that context. It no longer makes sense. We've moved forward. Justin Trudeau is no longer in power. The pandemic is behind us, and the sovereignty movement in Alberta persists. So I'm hoping that it's going to die down, that they're going to be able to negotiate an agreement with Mark Carney. And I do think that Albertans don't want a referendum. I'm hoping that that's true. I haven't been to Alberta, but just looking at it from a political perspective and looking at how the environment has changed, Daniel Smith has used it as a wedge issue to promote her own political position and to promote Alberta's interests within Canada. But now it's time to take a step back and look at the broader picture and see that Canada right now needs unity more than ever.
But it's funny, Justine, it's interesting, right, when you say that to promote her own interests. At the same time, when she was talking about this, she said, well, wait a sec, when this referendum does come to pass in October, I will be there promoting the Yes side to stay in Canada. So doesn't that seem to be an odd statement to make if your interests are to get more from Ottawa?
Well, it's, I think rightly so. Mark Carney has been saying that she is using it as a bargaining chip. She can't completely alienate the people that are in favor of a referendum in Alberta, because many of those people are her supporters and have been her supporters historically. So she, is now walking a fine line of saying, look, I am representing the interests of Albertans, even those Albertans who want to separate, but I'm now using it as a bargaining chip. I think she is reading the room. It's more important that Alberta stay in Canada than to allow this movement to gain traction.
All right, we leave it at that. Justine, thank you so much.
Hello, Canada.
This is Bryan Adams Radio, hosted by Bryan Adams himself.
We'll play a few of mine, a ton of my favorites, and some must-hear behind-the-scenes stories from the world of rock and roll. One thing about doing rock and roll so long is you end up meeting a lot of the people that you admire. Sometimes you even get to work with them.
It's only love, and that's all. Bryan Adams Radio. I'm coming back to you. Now available on the free iHeartRadio app.